to Meet the PI, presented by Animal Behavior Live. In this podcast, we sit down with leading researchers to explore their research journey, the challenge they faced, and advice for the next generation.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this already third episode of the Meet the PI ABL podcast. For the one who just attend this podcast for the very first time, I will just re-explain what it is about. So the idea is not to talk really about science, so to say, but more like to go beyond it and talk about the life of researcher. Eminent researcher from our field in animal behavior, try to understand how they arrived to their position, if there was some bump on the way, these type of things. I'm Alexis Buatois. I'm part of ABL, and I'm a researcher in Switzerland working on ecotoxicology and learning and memory in zebrafish. And today I will be joined by Tang Vaudoin, who is a group leader at the University of Queensland, Australia, working on development of insect-machine hybrid robot. And Tao Newman, a PhD student at the IISER Trivandrum in India and working on evolutionary significance of butterfly color patterns. And so, hi guys, and welcome to this podcast. So for this third episode, we have the chance to receive Dr. Anna Stöckl. I say it correctly, yeah. Welcome, Anna. Thanks to participate to this Meet the PI podcast. So, Anna, you are group leader at the University of Konstanz in Germany, and you and your team are focusing on understanding the neural basis of natural visual behavior in insects.
Yes.
And so, to this end, you are using multi-disciplinary approach, combining behavioral observation, but also neuroanatomy, using physics and imaging. In order to reply to a range of questions from how insects recognize specific visual pattern, for instance, or how insects are processing spatial information when moving. If you are interested by Anna's line of research, I take advantage of this to remind you that she will give a talk at our Animal Behavior Live annual conference called An Insect's View on Flowers, from Nectary Guidance to Pattern Recognition. And so this will be the 13th and 14th of November. So we really encourage you people to come and watch that talk. This will bring me to my very first question. One thing that is quite clear when we are watching your CV is that you always been very interested in understanding vision in animals, if I am not wrong.
Yeah.
And so apparently since master, I would say. And so you have investigated in insect, but also in mice. And so my very first question is how this passion for animal vision is actually born. Is it something that was here since a long time? And if yes, is there any major event or major person that you met that triggered this passion?
It's a good observation. It is true. It is one of the big lines through my research. And actually, the real interest and passion for vision for me started at school. When I was super lucky, in the last years of school, I had biology major in school, and we had, I think it was half a year where we focused on vision and how mainly the human retina functions and how really from the activity of nerve cells, perception is created, which I thought at the time was extremely fascinating. So I was really interested in biological science in general, but I was also really interested in philosophy. And I mean, I think vision is one of the places where these two match really nicely, because I think for the first time I really realized how perception and also the neuroscience basis for, let's say, sensing come together, and I loved it. I was so excited to learn about ganglion cells and after images and how they could be explained by the retinal circuitry, and it was so I was very excited. Interestingly though, I didn't really directly go on to study something that would let me dive deeper into vision. So I was also really excited by molecular biology. I went much more on the kind of molecular biology, biotechnology route to start with. But then I actually reconnected with vision pretty soon during my bachelor's as well.
Okay, very interesting. And so, like, I mean, what bring you to animals more than human, for instance? Because I imagine that maybe, like, at some point you could also think, okay, I want to become ophthalmologist, for instance,
Yeah.
because like it will that fit still with.
That's a very good question. Actually, one that I haven't thought about too much, because I did definitely start working with model organisms. So my bachelor thesis was on medaka fish, which are one of the kind of genetically accessible model organisms. Also for eye development, eye regeneration, that's what I studied. So I came to animals really through using them as models. And if I think about it, I think the first time I really worked with animals that are, what can I say, that are model organisms, but that are also really charismatic and charming. And I don't want to be mean to the medaka fish, they were also adorable, was when I did my master's thesis on electric fish, so not vision for once. And I also took care of the fish myself, because that wasn't the typical model that they had in the lab at the time. So I did a lot of looking after my fish. And I think this is really when I started to connect to the animals, to their life history. I was trying to make them breed so they generate interesting communication signals. So I really had to also learn a lot about how they would live in nature and not just stick to the lab environment. And then I think with insects, it becomes, I would say, almost very easy to be interested in the animals because you see them all around you. And I should really say, when I started, the first time I ever worked with insects was then really during my PhD. And it was a bit of a leap. I wasn't sure if I like it. It was partly a challenge to see what I think about it. But then the cool thing is they're all around us. So you really start to stop what you're doing when you sit outside on the terrace and they're flying by and going to flowers and start thinking about, I wonder how they're doing that. And so I would say it's something that gradually developed, that I also got really interested in the animals themselves rather than in them using them as tools to understand neural circuits and like cellular mechanisms. So that it took a while.
Yeah.
I think looking to your publication, it's very obvious that your work is very interdisciplinary. So you combine behavior, even physics, neuroanatomy, imaging, and even control system into your study of insect vision. So how you form that kind of interdisciplinary research?
I would say that's also a process. So one thing goes back to school, that I always had trouble picking the one thing that I'm interested in. So when I finished school, I wasn't actually sure if I want to study biology or philosophy or maybe history or something else. So I do find many things very fascinating. And I think that helps with the working interdisciplinary to be open for different approaches, for different methods. The other thing is that I have had the very big fortune to work in very interdisciplinary environments where I was introduced to different techniques, or I met researchers who were using different techniques and could learn about them and then start to incorporate them, because it's definitely not something that one can kind of start at once and do 10 different things at once, but it's something where you master one technique and then you start the next one and the next one. So it was definitely a slow process over time, kind of accumulating different methods and different, also something that's maybe interesting and important, different approaches to research, different languages almost. So I remember I already did my master's thesis in a relatively computational neuroscience lab. And when I started, and I feel like almost even more when I started my PhD, interacting with people who are much more on the computational neuroscience side, I really sometimes wrote down expressions because I didn't understand what they mean. And I had to start looking them up and processing to translate to the more biology kind of mind what they even mean by that. And now I notice I'm using the same expressions like as well, and have to correct myself when I speak to people who might not be familiar with them. So it's partly learning the methods, and it's partly learning the language, and then really appreciating the different approaches and the different viewpoints that come with it.
I see. What do you have any advice for the younger generation who want to work in the interdisciplinary field?
Yeah, so this is it's a tricky one to some degree. So I think absolutely be open would be my first advice. Be open for different approaches to your question. The nice thing about working interdisciplinary is that it almost always comes with working collaboratively, because you will meet other people who have different methods and come from different disciplines, and you work with them, which I think is amazing. One thing I would say, and I think that's sad, and that is something we can work on and everyone can work on who is in a more kind of leadership capacity in the academic system, is that, and you might experience that yourself, bridging from robotics to insect work, that I think if one works truly interdisciplinary, in the sense that one doesn't just combine different methods for one question within a discipline, as I mostly do, but really stands between disciplines, it can actually be quite difficult, because then one doesn't belong to either discipline. It's difficult getting grants because one isn't like fully in one or the other. And I think that's sad, because it's often, you read everywhere that we should work interdisciplinary, but if someone truly does it, it's actually not as straightforward as it should be, I find. But the advice would be still go for it. I think it can only broaden one's minds, and actually also get better answers to the research question, to approach it from different angles and with different methods. I would, however, be aware kind of the challenges that can also come with working interdisciplinary. We're working, I think many people are working on making this better, but I think currently there are definitely challenges attached to.
Yeah, but you will say that it's getting better in that sense, like that maybe, for instance, funding scheme like are going more in the direction of interdisciplinary, and that maybe, like, let's say, in about 10 years, it will be really something that that is more valuable.
That would be nice. I think what it really needs is not just, so to say, the commitment to write, it should be interdisciplinary, but a true understanding for what that means. Also that, for example, work might be a bit slower if one works interdisciplinary, especially if one starts a new project that bridges disciplines, because of having to master the methods, having to translate the languages and the concepts and all of this. And I think that, so there are more funding schemes, and I think that's fantastic. There, or at least in Germany, where I know the landscape quite well, there are definitely funding schemes that are specifically for interdisciplinary projects. I think we can still work on, so to say, building an understanding for what the specific challenges are. And that, for example, is a very simple thing. One might need more time for these projects than for a project where I continue what I've always done with the same methods that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
So Anna, your work is, you have extensively worked with the insect vision. And I'm assuming, like, has your research changed the way you perceive the natural world, and in what kind of way?
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure. It's almost hard, I almost don't dare to say that, but I actually didn't like insects at all to start with. So and all my work before I started my PhD really was on vertebrates. And I think also when I definitely thought about maybe becoming a scientist one day, in this very childish way of thinking about it, becoming a field researcher, stalking lions in the savannah or something. That was always vertebrate centered and possibly mammalian centered. And of course, I knew about insects and I saw them being very active where I grew up, but I never really considered them very much. And this has changed massively. So now I really enjoy watching insects, photographing insects. I do spend a lot of time just thinking about what they might be doing, how they might be solving problems when observing them. So yeah, it really changed the way that I perceive the world as well.
And do you think that it also changed your way to maybe outreaching to the general public? Because like I guess that since it changed your point of view regarding insects, maybe like it also gives you more strength into changing the way general public is seeing insects.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really fun actually, showing people what insects can actually do, how like also what the insect brain can do to start with, that insects do have a brain and that it's pretty capable. And it's a lot of fun. Also because at least the general public that I come in contact with is very receptive for it. There and many people are observing insects. That's the best thing I think when I give public talks or have contact public discussion rounds. How many people tell me their stories of observing insects and what interesting things they see? So yeah.
But actually, like you say that you started to have this passion for vision quite early, thanks to a class on vision. Like, are you participating, or are you like, for instance, going into school in order to explain what you are doing? Like, because I mean, I must say that me personally, like I did not really receive this type of things at school, like meeting researchers. So you never really know before to arrive, let's say in bachelor. So like, are you doing this type of action, and do you have the feeling that kids are really receptive and that it's a nice thing to do? Yeah.
So I'm doing a little bit of direct kind of outreach to schools. That's not the main outreach I'm doing. But we did have a workshop actually not too long ago. Was that 2 years ago? With school kids where we did talk about vision and perception and illusions and what insects can see, what humans can see, what we think insects can see, and if we're actually right in that. But I don't do a massive amount. What I do and what I have done, and I think that's also a really valuable way of how research could contribute to impacting what is taught at schools, is I'm collaborating with the didactics department that does the teacher education at universities. I've done this in Würzburg where I was before, and started collaborating here as well, where we are essentially doing projects where prospective teachers, so students who are studying to become teachers and who have to do essentially final thesis projects for their final thesis, are coming up with new course material or new course projects for their students that then also incorporates, for example, some of the research or at least research-related things that are going on, or we help them come up with simple experiments that they could be doing with the students. And that's really fun. It's really fun translating from this more lab-based things to something that you could potentially also do at schools.
No, it's very nice indeed. Yeah, but I mean, like, from my perspective, I have the feeling that certainly the outreach on kids is, I mean, of course, any type of outreach is important, but like the outreach on kids is certainly what is the most, because like it's also what kind of like it's the moment that maybe they are the more receptive to kind of understand the importance of things. But I always have, I mean, I hope and I guess that it changed a lot right now, that there's more and more people going to school, even like professional, like specializing in outreaching that are going in. But yeah, it's true that we still have a little way to improve this, I imagine. Yeah, and so I mean, of course, watching a CV, it's always funny because you always have the feeling that everything is super smooth, like from point A to point B, like it was just straight forward. But like, I was wondering, like, if you met some difficulty along the way, like for instance, finding postdoc, finding position, finding funding, and like, so like if you met some difficulties, which one? And I think the last thing will be that if you would have any advice for the youngest audience of this podcast, like on how to deal with this type of difficulty.
Yeah, I agree. My CV looks quite smooth, and what I would say is, for the most part, it was quite smooth. And I think maybe that starting with that advice, one thing that really helped me to keep it as smooth is that I always had people around me that were kind of one step ahead of me in the career ladder. and that I could ask for advice, and that I could also watch and could see what are they doing, what questions are they asking themselves, what funding are they applying for. And it really, really helped me to craft my own strategy. It's not like I copied everything that they were doing, but it really helped me to ask the right questions and to craft a strategy to go through my scientific career, and to also be aware of what things are needed at what stage and what should I invest in at a certain stage to get to the next one. So I think getting a good network is really, really, really important, and it's really important early on. And having that network through your career, I think that is the biggest help that I have had in my career to get through it the way that I got through it. I would say the biggest bump on my road was definitely, and now we're getting, it's not really interdisciplinary, but it was somewhat shifting. I didn't even shift topics. So I was working mainly with vertebrates, doing vision, doing electroreception, and then I started a PhD on insect vision in Sweden. And I feel like from master's to PhD, that's totally fine. You can change your model organisms. You can somewhat change your topic because everyone recognizes that there's a cut. You probably also haven't published much before. But for me, the insects were kind of the let's try this phase. And I always had in mind that I want to go back to vertebrate research and maybe even combine both, do vision on vertebrates and insects at some point. And I think that might have been a bit naive in hindsight for many reasons. And so after my PhD, I was really excited that I could go back to mouse research, and actually on the same topic. I was still working on dim light vision and retinal coding for dim light vision in mice. And that was probably the biggest bump. Like already then I had published pretty well in my PhD. I had also gotten some smaller grants, and all the postdoc funding I applied for, I didn't get. Like in many of them, I didn't even get through the first round. And that was interesting because it wasn't even badly ranked, or generally the reviews weren't so bad. And that could have been anything. I mean, I was also practicing writing grant applications and everything, but it was certainly quite tough to just process that, because these were my very first grants that I ever wrote, and I wrote quite a few, and I also thought they weren't so bad, and they were all rejected. And this is when I learned, okay, rejection is part of the process, and you have to learn to deal with it. But also when I learned it's also not always like you just have to accept it. There might not be something where you can point your finger on, okay, this is why it didn't work. This is tough, because we like to have reasons for things, and there are micro reasons. I'm sure that all reviewers had a good reason, but on the whole, it's sometimes hard to process what actually happened, because I mean, you want the reasons because you want to improve, basically. And then what can I say? I really enjoyed working during my postdoc, like with mouse retina, and kind of somewhat going back to things that I knew. But I also realized that even though I already knew some people from this field, I didn't have the connections in the field that I would have had in the insect field. And that became, I noticed that, let's put it like this. And I think that would already have been a bit more difficult, kind of pursuing a career like that. I think totally possible, but more difficult. And then I think the other thing that I realized is that for practical reasons and mainly for practical reasons, getting all the facilities and everything, it's highly unlikely that one could run a lab with the possibilities that I was seeing in Europe or in Germany specifically, kind of on insects and on mice and on all of this stuff. So, and I came to the point where I kind of had to make a decision if I want to stay with vertebrates and mice specifically or not. And one thing I would say that I really enjoyed about the insects is that you can work very holistically, that I can do behavior and physiology and anatomy, and I can also observe them in a natural environment if I want to. Not that you can't do that in vertebrate model systems, but it is a lot harder. And not just harder in the sense that you need more time, but you need more money, you need more people, you need more infrastructure. And so then I decided, okay, I'll go back to insects. But this was tough, because it was essentially a year that I spend investing into a new system and into a career path. And also, I should say, my postdoc supervisor at the time spent investing in training me and in this project. And what I would say, though, what I learned from this is be very aware when you change. What is it? I'm not even sure what you can say what it is, because you can totally change system. Maybe be very aware when you change networks, crowds in science, and model systems, in the sense that you're changing kind of who's reading which papers. So if you're starting to be in a new field where all the papers have different authors than you're used to, then I think that's when you shift it into a new crowd. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's definitely harder than if you stay within your field, especially at the postdoc and then young group leader level, where it's important to have these connections. And the other thing I learned is it's totally okay to try something and decide not to go for it and do something else. Because after a year, I switched back. Well, I was also extremely, extremely lucky. And this is also sometimes getting opportunities at the right time, that I was offered a position back in Germany where I could work with insects and could also work relatively freely to define my own research agenda, which that's not something that comes around every day. But when you have an opportunity, like, think about it and take it, and don't just keep going because you decided, okay, that's what I'm doing, and I decided for that. But also don't be shy to correct if you feel like this is not the path for you. That's my biggest lesson. In the end, it sounded at the time, I was like, oh God, I spent a year now in this other thing. And in hindsight, a year is nothing. But I'm very happy to be with the insects. I'm also very happy for the contacts I made in the mouse retina field. And at the very big meetings where we're all together, it's really nice seeing people and hearing how they're doing and how their research is doing. But I'm also very happy to be back with the insects. And on like the biggest thing with all of this is being very aware what one is doing, what the consequences of these decisions are, and if you want to go for these consequences or not, and then correct your path. That's important.
No, actually, I mean, it's super interesting, and I can relate a lot because, like, I switched from bees to zebrafish after my PhD. I mean, I'm still in zebrafish now, but like, I can definitely relate on this thing that you say, that it is a gap of network. In the sense that you will, I mean, it's funny because I stayed on learning and memory between my PhD and my very first postdoc, and I was like, okay, it will not change anything because I'm just changing model. I'm not changing topic. But I think it's important for people who are thinking of changing animal model, that sometimes animal model is more important than the topic in the eyes of people. I mean, it's a feeling that I had, at least, that it is almost like if you were restarting from scratch in the eyes of this new network. So indeed, like, I think it's a great advice that you give here to think of it, because it is a little bit actually it's really a gap that you have to pass. So really interesting what you just said.
But then I think it's cool that you are a good example for a successful switch. So I mean, we don't need to sort of say leave out that, okay, I tried the switch and I took it back, but one can and that's also what I want to say, one can totally do this, but as you say, one needs to be aware of it.
I mean, I would love to say yes, but at the same time, I'm not in position yet. So let's say that I promise that the day that I have a position, I will also say, you see, I am a successful switch, but I cannot really tell it yet. But okay. No, it's super interesting, I think, for people to hear this, actually, because I mean, from many discussions, like, I think people are really afraid to try new things, especially after the PhD, and sometimes, like, it can be also a bit frustrating because maybe you want to just explore your different options. But I can understand that for people it's quite complex. But actually, I mean, so it's a good introduction to my next question, I will say, because, like, you started as a group leader, so not so long time ago, 3 years ago, right? So we can still say that it's quite fresh. And so, like, I was wondering, like, if you had some challenges to switch from postdoc to this? And what will be the advice that you will give to early career researchers who are about to transition? If there is anything that they should, let's say, prepare ahead of this transition to be sure to not be too surprised by it.
It's an interesting one. So my path to this was also a bit special in the sense that I kind of sneak peeked into it. So when I actually switched from my postdoc back to insects and went to Germany, I had a position in Würzburg where they are really cool positions in Germany, and I don't think they exist everywhere, where I could essentially determine my own research agenda, and I could also apply for PhD student funding. So I actually had a PhD student at that time, before I really started my bigger group. So I could start with one person, which that was really nice for me because you can slowly get into it. And I think generally it's really helpful to have supervision experience before from bachelor students, master students, student assistants in the lab. That is really, really helpful. And that's something that I think everyone can get in their postdoc. And I would recommend getting it. But what I would say is the biggest change is that even if you supervise bachelor and master students, you never have the level of responsibility that you then have when you start your own group for the people. Starting with legal responsibility when you hire them, for safety, for the whole financial responsibility for the projects. And that's just something to be aware of, that this responsibility comes, and that if everything goes well, that's fantastic. You probably don't feel it that much, but that you will come to places where you really get reminded of having that responsibility, and that you really go from being a one-person show, kind of, even if you supervise students, to being in a leadership role. And that, can you prepare for that? I think if you're aware of it, that's already really helpful. I think most universities have training schemes in many different ways for leadership positions, which I found helpful. Also for the input we got, I should say, but the most helpful thing for me was to be with the other people. Again, having people around me who are in the same positions, maybe a little bit further, and who I can just talk about things, what I've been doing, what they are doing in these situations, that I found really, really helpful. And maybe to prepare, it could probably be helpful to talk with the group leaders at your institution that are already at the stage, and ask them what they are going through, what their challenges are, to get a bit of an idea what's coming.
Yeah, okay. But then, so regarding this, like, would you say that being a good group leader is also coming with the fact to understand, let's say, perfectly how the system works, like how the country works? Because it's also something that we can tell is that between different countries, the rules are so different when it comes to be group leaders. So, like, how did you have the feeling that understanding well this was a great advantage in being a good group leader?
Yeah, that is a very good point. And it is very helpful to understand the system. The question is a bit, what's a good group leader? I would say to be a good advisor to your people and to run your projects efficiently. You can do that anywhere, but to do it with less time investment on your side and most efficiently, it's really, really good to know how the system works. And probably everyone says this about their own system, that, Germany is particularly messed up in terms of administration, and definitely what I should say is I also didn't know how the German system worked, because I did my PhD and my postdoc in Scandinavia, so I had I had no idea. And as a student, you have no idea how that actually works. But speaking German is very helpful, speaking the national language, especially because a lot of the administration at the university is run not always in English. And then understanding employment law, understanding kind of how the financial systems are run at the universities can really make your life a lot easier or a lot worse if you don't know it, for sure. And again, if you don't know, I think it is worth investing some time in learning it, which of course is tough if you then are not planning to stay in that country and you have to learn the next country's system. Though I would say getting some sort of practice in dealing with the systems. And now I'm really thinking about kind of dealing with the university administration and the things you can do and the things that you're told you can't do and how to solve these. I think that applies to every country, because even though the rules are different, the way that you solve these conflicts is probably very similar.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it's a good advice indeed.
No, I just wanted to add, I mean, the other thing is understanding how the systems works is, of course, important for advising your group members who might want to continue their careers in that country, and also starting to help them build up their CV in a way that will be useful in that particular system, which this is really difficult because not everyone, let's say in my case, wants to stay in Germany. And then you have to be aware, okay, what do you need if you want to go to the US? What do you need if you want to stay in Germany? Many things are similar. Not all things are the same. And then you should be aware actually of more than your own system to be able to really support people.
Yeah.
Right. I think you brought a very nice or interesting idea about the system into your career. But another thing is like, how about gender? As a woman, do you feel like there's a lot of challenge, or you still facing challenge in academics?
I must say I have never felt discriminated against in any way during my career. On the contrary, I actually had many systems, especially through the universities, for example, leadership for women in science or leadership training, that were specifically geared towards supporting women in science. And I've always been in environments where gender did, as far as I perceived it, did not play a role. But of course, I'm aware of let's say the statistical landscape in the systems, and having been in Scandinavia, or in Sweden, I should say, specifically, having done my PhD there and spent a lot of time there and coming back to Germany, it is noticeable. And I would say mostly on the level of how families are treated. And that might be the difference. So not having kids, I didn't particularly feel like I had obstacles that men, let's say, specifically didn't have. But how you treat young families is very different in Germany and in Sweden. And the support and just the general acknowledgement that people with kids have different work hours, that you need to put meetings within the times that the daycare is open, things like that. That was definitely different. And I think it's much more normal to just accept that people have lives and families, also in academia, in Sweden compared to in Germany. So this is where really, and also statistically, this fits with where the challenge is, at least in Germany, but I think that's true for other academic systems too. I just know the numbers here better. That's where the challenges are. The real bottleneck comes with the time when people start families, and comes with when people start their own research groups. Like the worst kind of crunch time in academia is also the kind of hardest crunch time in private life. And I think that's really where the problems arise, and where support is lacking and understanding is lacking for the challenges that come with it. That's my personal take on it.
Maybe I can actually follow up on this, because I mean, we can tell that in general, researchers, including myself, actually struggle quite a lot to balance personal life and academic life. So it's what you were kind of saying right now, when you are starting to make a family, for instance. And I mean, it's quite mind consuming. So obviously, we all come back home with a lot of questions in our mind, even if we would prefer not. And I was wondering, what's your mindset regarding this when it comes to this type of problematic, and like if maybe if you have special strategy in order to not be haunted by work when you are coming back home?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've just been talking about this to some group members because I do think, and I think that's important, different people have different strategies and also different levels of what they can accept in terms of work-life balance. So my husband, also being a scientist, also in biology, we do talk about work a lot. Not just our own, I mean, generally work and generally science, but also, of course, our own work. And we do talk about it a lot in what would technically be our free time. And I really enjoy it, the way that I also enjoy talking about politics or sports or other things. But this is what works for me. And I think this is important to recognize, might not work for everyone. I did learn, and I must say that was good to learn, to set some boundaries, turn notifications off in the evenings, do not go to sleep and read your work emails just before that, like some things like that, to have some sort of hygiene in terms of work information in your private life. And then I think where the level is that one can tolerate or even be very happy with is different for everyone. I do think what really helps me is finding activities where I can turn my mind off, be that sport, be that photographing, be that fiddling with old furniture and concentrating on getting the lacquer off it, and listening to audiobooks while doing that. But whatever one does, finding something that really turns the mind off and just concentrate kind of on the task. For me, it's concentrating on the task at hand, because if I'm not doing something, I'm thinking about stuff. There are other people who can, I don't know, go running or hiking and just have an open mind that doesn't need to be occupied, but it doesn't think about work. And I think it's important, and this is what a PhD is really helpful for learning. Learn about yourself, learn how you work, learn how much you can tolerate, learn when you need. I mean, there are people who can sleep 4 hours a night, and there are people who need 8 hours of sleep a night. And some that need 10, but learn what works for you and what balance you need to be healthy, and then how you recharge. And I think that's a really good thing to do during a PhD and possibly during a postdoc. It's really good as one has learned this when one starts a group, because then more tasks kind of get added, and then it's really good if one has a good understanding of oneself, I think.
But do you have the feeling also that maybe in academia some things could be like improved in order to just like kind of reduce this mental load in researcher? And like, do you have any suggestion of things that that could be improved?
For sure. Most beloved topic of most academics, but the amount of time, and this is speaking like now from a group leader perspective, but the amount of time we spend with administration is unbelievable. And like when I started, and this is true for many groups, I didn't have a secretariat, so I was my own secretary. And even if you have someone who does some of the secretarial work, it's still a lot left with everyone. And I mean, this is a large scale, so to say, push for the future, but reducing the amount of administrative tasks and duties would be really helpful, because it takes so much time and so much energy and anxiety that is not necessary, because the solutions are found most of the time in the end. But to get there, you spend so much energy. Another thing that I think I find very interesting that I observed as a group leader, or coming into this group leader phase. So I've always done a lot of things. I was student representative as a PhD student in multiple functions. I also started to be kind of interested in doing things in societies. But when I became a group leader, a lot of opportunities opened up for taking like editorial roles, or what are they, like wider editorial roles in journals, getting functions in societies, taking functions at the university, kind of self-administration in different boards. And everyone says, hey, this is really good because you need to get experience in how all of this works if you want to become a professor. Also, you get exposure in the community, and it all sounds very sensible, but it's kind of crazy that at the stage when you for the first time start actually running a bigger operation, you do all the administrative stuff, all the buying things for your lab, supervising people for the first time, and then you get all of these additional roles on top of that. It's kind of bizarre that we're doing this in hindsight. I mean, and I did learn a lot. But I do think some of these functions that people like to push on early career research, and particularly on group leaders who are not tenured yet, I think we could really help people to reduce that and say, okay, there are functions that people who have tenure are also very, very busy, but at least they have a safe outline on their life. They know where they're employed, they know where they live. They don't have existential anxiety anymore. That some of these additional tasks that we do in the scientific system could be given, or other way around, that people who don't have tenure yet could be shielded from these tasks, because it's a lot. And
I also think it starts quite early also. Yeah. Because even as a postdoc, like you already start to get a lot of this mental load. Yeah. Because I mean, in another way, I imagine, but like you kind of mix between doing experiment, but still searching for scheme, and like at the end, like I mean, having to budget things, and like you say, a lot of things that sort of prevent you to focus primarily on science. And I agree with you that if it was changing, I guess it would make a lot of people quite more relaxed and able to focus on research.
And to be fair, I think one just has to accept that as you get more and more responsibility, you will have less and less time to focus on research directly, primarily as the kind of that's okay. I just think that. And maybe that's also something in the academic system in general. We just accept that we're doing a lot of stuff for free in our free time.
It is.
In the time that we don't actually have, but that we just pile and pile and pile. And it's almost sometimes like a race of who has the most voluntary functions. And in a sense, it's absurd. But I mean, that's way beyond this podcast. It's absurd that we are running publication with voluntary review systems.
No, it is definitely I think there's a lot to change on that side to sort of make our mental load decrease too. Definitely.
But I do think that is something that will only work if people in positions of power getting active, but if also everyone highlights this, that these are additional things that we are all doing that take that eat in our free time, because how else are they supposed to be done? And that it's also expected that they're just done on top of things. So I think this is good to reiterate, is at the very latest in kind of university context, when it's about, okay, what can you actually do? And just to be clear about it, that this is something we all have to kind of also fit in our, or there's a lot that we have to fit in our time schedules that is not actually so obvious from what we do every day.
But then I must say that also somehow we are preventing the creation of new line of job, because so to say, like for instance, reviewing system could be actually like people who were not into continuing in academia, but who are still having the skills in order to review papers, and then you just create a full new range of job. So I mean, I mean, it's a complete debate, obviously, but I completely agree with you.
Following on this topic. So now you have so many roles. You're like doing your active research, you are mentoring your students, and you were sharing about your outreach activities also. And then on top of that, we are discussing about this editorial review work. How do you manage your time of all these roles?
I'm just thinking if I have some general strategies. I think number one is I've learned to be realistic about how long things take, and that's really important. Another thing that I think PhD time and postdoc time are really valuable for learning to be realistic in budgeting time, because now I really need it. So I got quite realistic in knowing what I can actually do. So also, for example, how many people can I have in my group if I still want regular meetings with everyone, and if I still want to have a good idea what's going on in these projects and not meet them like every 3 months and kind of loosely mentoring people. And there's a hard limit to that because there's only that many hours in the week that I can have meetings. And the other thing, how do I manage my time? I pretty much then go from there. Like my group and the science is the first thing. So I make sure that I have time for the scientific meetings. And then I structure, or knowing when teaching is as well. And I structure everything around that. And I think the most important thing that I have learned is to always have buffer time. So I probably have easily 15% of my time easily in the week that I don't have anything planned because something will come in. So that's the other thing. And yeah, and I pretty much go through, I mean, I have kind of long-term plans for what I want to do or achieve in the year, and then short-term plans for what happens in the month and what happens in the week. So I am quite planny. And I think, but the kind of prerequisite for any of these plans is to have a realistic idea of what needs how much time.
Maybe I just add on top of this, how about teaching? Do you have any teaching load? Because that's something that we need to be very careful, because we now need to design the lectures and also convey the lectures. And most of the time, I found that teaching is very time consumable.
Yes, absolutely it is. I do have teaching requirements, but I would say I am in the very lucky situation that I didn't have to really establish something new. So I did change some of the course work that we're doing, and where new things happened, it was very close to my core expertise and the core research that we're doing. So it wasn't that hard to build, but I totally agree. I've been teaching before topics that aren't that close to my core expertise, and it takes so long to prepare, especially lectures. And it's definitely something to be aware of also in this group leader stage when you're starting to build up things. If you have an extremely heavy teaching load, you basically have no time left. So I am doing so many things because my teaching load is very light.
So like to follow up on this, so like, I mean, as we understand, like you have a lot of different activity as a group leader, and plus, like you were saying, that at some point you have to accept that more you are going in your career and less you will do actual science. Are you still managing to put a bit the hand on the experiment at the bench? And like, are you afraid? Because I know that it's something that very often crossed my mind, like being afraid to not being able anymore to really realize how long can be an experiment, or like, you know, to not have this actual vision of how hard or how long can it be for a student to do the experiment.
So how much do I still do? I don't have any active research projects anymore. So I'm mainly managing. I do get to go to the lab if we start something new or we're building up new methods. Especially, if those are things that I'm experienced with, then I'm still there for the first until it works. So I've very recently, that was very exciting, done some like multi-electrode recordings, but at least we got it started for a very long time. So I'm still in the lab, but mainly in a supportive capacity. I have actually been thinking about whether, like, once people have been, because a lot of new people started also this year. So I was thinking maybe when everyone, and I'm not going to hire people for a little while so things can consolidate. Maybe when things are consolidated, I have some time to do some recordings, physiological recordings or something, but I'm not that, speaking about realistic expectations, I'm not sure how realistic that is. I do think currently I still have realistic ideas of experiments. And I mean, everyone is welcome to ask people in my group if that's true or if that's just my view of like what we can do, how we could set them up, how long they will roughly take, plus minus, given how animal experiments always go in terms of variability. Also because I have weekly meetings with everyone as like where we discuss the projects, we discuss what's happening. So I feel like I have a very good grasp on them at the moment. How that will go with if I move on in this system with more like with a permanent position, but more responsibility, also kind of more teaching, more central administrative responsibilities, that will be very interesting. I really enjoy it. I must say I enjoy being close enough to the projects that I can also kind of think along and make suggestions and interpret the data and discuss with people about the interpretation of the data. I think that's really fun. And I should say, as much as I love physiological experiments, I love seeing neurons in action. And but I always liked analyzing the data more than actually doing the experiments. So that's probably what makes it not so hard for me to not be in the lab regularly, even though in the beginning of starting my group, I also still did analyze a lot of data, especially from students like bachelor, master students who weren't in the lab anymore, which of course now all the PhD students, postdocs in my lab analyze their own data. So this is also slowing down. And that I miss.
I see.
But that's also easier to integrate, like if I want
because
to.
you can still give a look to the data anyway. So okay. Yeah, I think I will have just a small series of questions that will be more interesting for bachelor and master students, certainly. And the first one is that what would you expect from a student application? Like what a student should include in his application to just like kind of attract your attention, so to say. So like, for instance, the skill or maybe like the motivation for the question, this type of things.
You mean for doing for a PhD or
no for an application to have? Sorry, I was not that clear. For an application in your lab, for
to
instance.
do like a internship or a thesis project or something like this. Well, I might be a bit strange in that, but honestly, for me, the most important thing is people's motivation. So I'm really, I care about that people are really interested and motivated to whatever they want to learn of the different things that we do. If that becomes clear, and from let's say the initial letter, so maybe and one can make the specific. So what I notice is if people write specifically about what they find interesting in our group, what they want to learn. If I get the feeling someone really wrote this letter or this email to us specifically and to and looked at the website, looked at what we're doing. Honestly, this is generally enough for me to set up a meeting and talk to them, and then I can find out everything else.
Okay.
Of course, if someone has specific skills that fit what we're doing, this is amazing. Put them in because it really helps. But what I'm looking for is people who are genuinely interested and motivated to work with us.
Yeah, so the conclusion is that definitely it's better to have an unskilled student but who is very motivated than a skilled one without any interest for the subject. And like you will say that you are more sensitive to spontaneous application or like to people who are just waiting for call in order to come?
This depends a lot, I must say, because we don't get that many spontaneous applications for internship projects. So if anyone hears this, we're always open. We have places for bachelor and master's thesis. We don't really have calls as such, but I'm happy to. And we've had a few spontaneous applications for internships that most of them worked out. If we could figure out, especially when people came from abroad, if we could figure out funding, they all worked out. So I don't have a particular preference. I also I would never discourage people from applying. That's very important. So also I do get regular applications for PhDs, and at the moment I'm really sorry, but like currently just not hiring anyone because we've reached the limit of what I can currently manage in the group. But still I can write back quickly and people can try somewhere else. But I think it's really important to take your chances and opportunities and write to people. This is actually how I made contact with the group in Sweden that I eventually ended up doing my PhD in. I wrote to someone who wasn't my PhD advisor, but someone else, Dan Erik Nilsson, there, because I read his book. And I had some time between my bachelor's and my master's in summer. So I was like looking for an internship. And I just wrote to his professor that I had no idea about at all. I just read the book and I said, hey, I would really like to do an internship with you in whatever capacity possible. And he wrote back and I did an internship for 4 months. I got to know my future PhD advisor there and I eventually returned for my PhD. So like absolutely make yourself opportunities, write to people. The worst thing that they can say is no. The best thing they can say is yes. And even if they say no, I currently don't have anything, but that's also great.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you are raising here because like I already heard several students say, yeah, but I did not network because I did not go in any conference. Like indeed, there's not only conference. Like I will say that it's important that you guys send email, even if you don't know people, like you have no risk doing it. Like, so yeah, I think it's a very nice point that you are raising here. I think we arrived pretty much at the end of our time. So like, I will just go through a series of rapid fire questions before the end. No worries, everything will go well. So like, I just ask you and you try to reply as fast and as short as possible.
Okay.
So if you had to explain your research to a 10-year-old in one sentence, what would it be?
I want to understand how insects see and what their brain makes of that information, and then how they move through the world.
Okay, that works. Looking back, what would you tell to your PhD postdoc self?
I think I would tell it to worry a little less.
It's a great one. If you weren't a researcher, what you will be doing now?
I do ask myself that. And I think I will ask myself that for a while to go. Oh.
Okay, so we'll not have the answer today.
Yeah, I don't have it either.
What's your favorite animal? It doesn't have to be the one you are studying.
I know it's the rapid fire one, but this is hard.
No worries, I'm sure that no other animal will take it bad if you don't cite them.
But see, this is my eternal problem. Sorry, I'm spoiling your rapid fire question here. Session. I could never decide on just one thing, so that's very difficult. I'll give it to the hummingbird hawk moths.
Okay. If you had a superpower, what will you change in academia now?
Oof. A lot.
If you had to choose one that comes first to your mind.
I would change. This is very German specific. I would change the way that we. I would basically implement a tenure track system in Germany with.
Okay.
Yeah. With better scoring criteria than we currently use that actually score supervision abilities and really scientific output.
Okay. So a little bit more of a light question, coffee or tea while working?
Oh, tea.
Tea. One moment of your career that remain unforgettable.
I think when I got my first recording from a laminar monopolar cell, that
was the moment.
That was really exciting.
Okay. If it was possible, anything that you will change in your career?
I thought about this a lot, and at the times I wished I could change things, but I think in hindsight it is good the way it was. I think I really cherish all the experiences that I made.
Okay. And for the last one, would you turn into an insect if it means that you could better understand how they see?
No, I think I'll stay human.
You'll stay human. Very well.
I don't want to be eaten by birds. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, to finish, we like to ask if you have any recommendation. Can be a book, can be a movie, can be anything. Doesn't even have to be science. Like if it's something that is not science, but yeah.
I am wondering, let me give a moment to think about what.
You can think. If anything, I will cut this moment and like this, it looked like you were super fast.
This is good. Because I would love to recommend, so this is what I really enjoy, is recommend photography and also macro photography, but I can't.
It works.
I can't think of, I'm terrible with remembering specific people, so I can't think of specific photographers at the moment, other than all the ones I follow on Blue Sky that I really enjoy. Yeah.
Okay, so we can tell to people to just go watch whose photographer you are following on Blue Sky and to just give it a look. Okay, so thanks a lot, Anna, for this very nice discussion. I think we learned a lot today. Principally that it's important to never give up, and even if you change model, for instance, it's okay to just go back to your first model, or that's trying things is important, and to just go with what you like to do, I will say, in research. And so as a reminder, so Anna will have a talk at our conference, so do not hesitate to come and attend. It's a free event, and so Anna will just tell us more about her research, a line of research this time, less about research life, but more about research science. So I'm sure it will be really interesting. So yeah, please everyone, come and join us. So thanks Anna, thanks Tang, and thanks Tarun for this very nice discussion.
Meet the PI is presented by Animal Behavior Live, an inclusive international platform bringing together animal behavior researchers across the world to discuss the latest research and question our academic practices. To know more, check our website at animalbehavior.live.